Welcome all, and thank you for joining us this evening for the last webinar of 2024. It's hard to believe. For those who don't know me, my name is Sarah. I'm one of the Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake's Program and Outreach Coordinators. And before we get started, I'd like to just go over a super brief tech orientation that you're going to see here on the next slide, just to ensure a pleasant experience for tonight's program. And first, we ask that you keep yourself muted during this presentation. Also, if you have to get up and move around, we please ask that you turn off your camera. This session is being recorded, so again, if you do not wish to be shown during this webinar, please turn off your camera now. And last, you can use the chat function as a way to ask for help should you need assistance. One of our IPC staff here tonight will do their best to assist you. Next, I'd just like to take a look at a lovely staff photo from our first summit. Thanks to everyone that came. We hope to see you at our next one, as I am depicted there, front row, second to last. And if you find yourself in the DMV area looking to connect, please reach out to me. My contact information is listed. Next, you're going to see our program lineup as we will begin with a land acknowledgement and an opening reflection, followed by some information about our organization for any new folks in the room. And then we'll get to meet our panelists for an in-depth discussion tonight. And then we're going to follow up with the question and answers and close with a prayer. So now I would like to take a moment to acknowledge this land and these waters that were stewarded by many who came before. So please join us while muted in recognition. For today, we hold space for and reflection on and gratitude for the land upon which we live and the local waters that support and nourish us all. We recognize that this land and these waters were stewarded by many who came before, and reflect tonight as people of faith in response to the calling of our hearts to come alongside the original stewards of this land and these waters that sustain us all. We seek to change the narrative of this story, our story, towards one of harmony with the gifts of creation and all living beings. And so we encourage you to learn more by exploring a map that we'll provide a link for in our follow-up email. It's nativeland.ca, and it shares some of the history of this region of the original stewards from up to about 1,000 years ago. So just keep in mind it's a snapshot out of which we know there's more than 15,000 years of Indigenous history in our region. And so now I'd just like to shift gears and just ground us for tonight's program in an opening prayer for winter as we head into this colder season. It's very blustery where I'm at and windy, so this is just the perfect prayer to start us off. Lord of ice and evergreens, just as nature continues its work beneath a blanket of snow, work your way beneath the surface of my life. Use this season to prepare me for flourishing. Help me find new ways to celebrate this season and enjoy the activities it offers. Refining fire, protect those who face the cold without shelter, and deliver us all from winter storms. Show me how to spread the warmth of your love to all I encounter. Amen. So thank you so much for taking that moment of acknowledgement and reflection together. And so we're just going to share some more of our gratitude for some of the sponsors that fund our work and make this possible, as you can see here. They give us the capacity to operate as a connector organization, as you can see on the next slide, which just kind of illustrates a puzzle on how we help organizations connect with congregations in search of resources to pursue environmental stewardship projects, find support with grants and local government agencies and technical partners. So if you want to find out more about who's already partnering with us, you can learn more about our One Water partnership and sign our pledge. You'll see our pledge on the next slide. We're going to provide links to these wonderful resources and programs, including an action kit that's dedicated to reducing waste our staff work diligently on that we have available as a free toolkit in this post-recording follow-up. So next. We also want to make mention of any green teams that are joining us here tonight or those looking to build your team that haven't signed up yet. Our next virtual training is March, spring of 2025. Again, we'll provide those links, or you can check it out on our event page. And so here, we just also want to remind folks we have many, many resources. I'm still always baffled by how many are on our website, and they're all in an effort to strengthen your efforts at your places of worship and home. So let's delve straight into the heart of tonight's discussion. We are all here to learn about sustainable consumption and kind of how to navigate this during the holiday season. I'd like to introduce our first speaker of the evening, Liv Pierce, who will share some amazing information and some resources for folks related to this topic. Liv has worked in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast regions addressing community housing, insecurity, environmental planning, and climate resilience and food sovereignty. They spent the last year farming on both urban and rural farms, leading education and engagement events on food justice and regenerative agriculture models. She's worked for the city, county, state, and federal government entities on community planning initiatives, in addition to multiple environmental nonprofits and community organizations. Just amazing. Can't say enough about how much Liv has been doing in this field of work. She graduated from Temple University with a BS in Community Development and Planning and a certificate in Graphic Information Systems. They're continuing their education, learning more about climate resiliency and community care models created by Black and Indigenous communities that integrate ancient and modern practices of stewardship, which is amazing, into how communities can navigate during this time. So everyone, please welcome Liv.
Hi everyone. Thank you all for having me here. It's really nice to be with so many cool, dedicated people. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly. I have a presentation. Um, and so I guess, so to start off, hi, I work with an organization called Sustainable Maryland. We are based out of the University of Maryland in College Park. We are nested within a separate organization called the Environmental Finance Center, which was started by the U.S. Department of Environmental Protection, the Environmental Protection Agency. So we wear a couple different hats, but I will get into what we do and then get into our discussion tonight. So this is me. Um, so Sustainable Maryland actually operates in a way that is very similar to IPC, which is really exciting. We work with Maryland municipalities to do a number of different things related to sustainability, but largely operating under the philosophy of how do we help Maryland communities navigate doing whatever their landscape for sustainability looks like, and how do we ensure that they are connected to resources and other like-minded municipalities and communities trying to do similar things. So as part of that, we run a certification program where if you do a certain number of actions in our action menu, you can get certified at either the bronze or silver level. You'll see this map over here on the side has a bunch of dots, and those are all of the communities who have been certified or registered in the program. And so we work all over the state with communities of all different sizes and landscapes. We also do green team trainings in a similar manner to IPC, but these are municipal green teams. But I imagine if some of you maybe are on both, who knows, that would be cool. Um, we also do leadership trainings and webinars with a variety of state and local partners to talk about the sustainability and climate landscape. Um, our program largely, when we talk about sustainability, takes a pretty holistic approach to it. So thinking about things like economic development and historic preservation, in addition to things like community action, natural resource maintenance, and all of those things. So it's a very broad approach. But that allows us to tailor our work to the communities that we're working with specifically to ensure that they are getting the most help that they need. We also run a couple grant programs and offer opportunities for municipalities to network with one another. And again, just kind of build coalitions tied by like regions. So for instance, with the Chesapeake, right, like we do a lot of work with municipalities who maybe share the same watershed or natural body nearby. So with that, I guess I'm going to get into this discussion. Um, I hope you'll bear with me. I start at kind of a high level, kind of like talking about the philosophy of overconsumption, and then I get into more practical things. But I figure this group could kind of rock with that. So I will just get into it. So taking an unconventional approach to overconsumption, there are kind of a few different ways to think about it. One is like philosophically, like how do we end up in a place where overconsumption is so common, right? Like, what does it mean that we feel motivated to consume in the ways that we do? What are the lessons that we are taught that kind of promote this behavior? thinking communally, right? Like, how do we work as collective groups, as people in community, as social creatures, to create solutions and find ways forward that work together to mitigate the amount of waste that we create with overconsumption. Um, and then also just thinking practically, like what are tangible behaviors that we can integrate both as individuals and as larger community groups to move forward. And in thinking about trying to do this presentation, there's a lot of, I think, when we discuss things related to sustainability in particular, oftentimes people are looking for like the quick and easy solution that you can kind of just like integrate and it, not much has to change. And that's just kind of the way that we move forward. Um, but part of what I'm trying to do and what a lot of my like people I work with, we're trying to um, tie sustainability into practices that we have always had and always carried with us and honoring those as being sustainable practices and also thinking about new ways forward that allow us to take what is good, build something new, and leave behind what is no longer helpful for us. So thinking about like sustainability and the holidays, right? I think these two ideas are deeply interrelated to one another in the sense that sustainability, in the way that I'll be talking about it, there are many different ways you can define it for better or worse. In this context, sustainability is a practice and a philosophy wherein people work together to create regenerative systems that sustain all life for social and physical ecosystems, right? How do we care for one another? How do we care for the land? And how do we do that in a way that will be carried out over time? And then when we think about the holidays, right, and like the holiday spirit, like what are the guiding principles that we carry in this time and also just in life in general, but that we kind of try to remain grounded in this time? Is to celebrate is when people come together to celebrate our connectedness to one another, to all the things that make our life beautiful and, bountiful, all of these things. Um, and so when we think about these two concepts and how they relate to one another, they're both rooted in a lot of similar philosophies of connectedness, rituals and practices that support the well-being of ourselves and others. And they both encourage generosity and reciprocity, both with people and the land. Again, this is like very high level, but I think when we think about overconsumption and building like sustainable practices, a lot of that has to start with our internal philosophy that we carry around how we relate to one another and also, um, goods and services and whatnot. And so with overconsumption, it thrives on this idea of self-sufficiency in a very warped way that tries to remove the community ties that we carry. So the idea that like when communities are like when people are self-sufficient, communities on the whole share fewer resources with one another. Individuals will buy more goods and services that are typically shared. And then overconsumption, the act of owning a lot of things becomes a sign of success rather than the ability for one to be integrated with the people around them. One example that I use often, particularly around the holidays, is rideshare services. For people in my generation in particular, um, there's a dying phenomena of like asking a friend for a ride to the airport. A lot of people my age, in particular, will see that as like asking too much of people, and so will rely on, a service to get where they need to go rather than a community practice of carpooling, of sharing rides, of asking one another to be of service to one another. Um, and another example is like, like when people feel obligated to own so many things rather than sharing them, we find that, people own a lot of stuff, but they don't actually need it if it was like a shared resource. Um, and so thinking about community, right? Like community is one of the most effective waste diversion strategies that we have. When we are able to share things with one another, whether that be food or skills or things that we no longer need in our life, we are able to reduce the amount of waste going into landfills or, all of these other avenues, our watershed. we are able to create more circular ways of living, which is how we've lived for, centuries, right? Like that's always how we've related to one another. Um, and so part of this discussion is like challenging the idea of like, why do we value newness as the be all end all of success or worth, and devalue things that have been owned or used by people previously to us, when from a sustainability perspective, if we're trying to create systems that are, sustainable and green, like things must be used by multiple people over a long period of time. They have to be able to be repaired and reused in multiple ways, to create, things that don't end up in landfills or all of these other places. So community is a really great way to remain grounded in our ability to help one another before relying on things that we, have to buy. And so all of that's like a very high level analysis, I guess, of this that kind of relates to more practically, like what does that actually look like in our everyday life? So composting and sharing food with one another around the holidays, we see a lot of food waste, particularly because people have leftovers and rather than sharing them, they just end up being thrown away. Um, and so again, this idea of like sharing food is at the heart of so many of our spiritual practices and beliefs, right? Like sharing food, opening our table to people who we may not normally break bread with, all of that is at the heart of so many of our faith systems and is increasingly being abandoned for this new idea of like self-sufficiency. Another thing around the holidays is like making gifts for people. Um, you know, uh, Creating things rather than consuming them. There are also a bunch of increasingly cool programs around like if you get Christmas trees every year, you can recycle them. The state of Maryland has a bunch of programs related to that. I have resources at the end. You can also rent Christmas trees. There are farms now who are doing that as a model, where you can either pick it up or they'll drop it off, and then at the end of the season, they will come get it. And that's a great way, again, to have trees be reused over time rather than constantly putting them, in places where they shouldn't be. Um, Also around the holidays, we see a lot of candles being used. And one fun activity that I have done with family members and kids that I have in my life is saving candle wax and making new candles. It's like a really fun way to like think creatively about like how are we using our resources and making new things out of old things that typically we wouldn't see used again. Um, Also, like giving gifts of like your time and your skills or experiences. I do embroidery and other fiber arts. So for the holidays or birthdays, I will like repair things for people or decorate things for people that I had a friend who stained a pair of jeans and they were her favorite pair of jeans. And she was like, I don't know what to do. And so for her birthday, I was able to like embroider them and, give them new life and kind of reimagine how they can be used in her life. Just like small things like that, right? Like these are things that we've always done, but just like connecting them to this idea of like, oh, these are things that are sustainable practices that we've always carried, but in building that framework, we're able to see how we're able to carry new things with us. So yeah, so these are just, ideas of like being in community, sharing space, sharing food, sharing resources, for places that have the opportunity and ability, creating things like lending libraries, so tool libraries, seed libraries, coat drives, all of those things where I recently saw one where there was a local sledding hill and this group of parents got together and built a little like rack to store sleds. And then they just left it on the hill and put a sign like take and leave a sled. And it was just there for the winter season. And then at the end, someone came and collected them, stored them, and brought them back out again. So this idea of like there are fun, creative ways to reuse and share things that sometimes get lost at this time of year when there's so much like pressure to like buy all these new things and think about things in a way that is not sustainable. So yeah, I think those are kind of my high level things. And then I also just have some resources at the end that I can share with Sarah related to things like composting, tree recycling and renting, lending libraries, how do you start those, and just a few other things related to this talk. But I think that's all I got for now. And then happy to answer any questions or chat about more like integrations for like thinking about like green teams or faith practices, like any questions you have, I'm happy to answer them. So, yeah.
Liv, thank you so much. I actually really love the breakdown and defining sustainability and how that relates to community ties and our behavior. That example kind of shows me how out of touch I am with the new generation because I definitely still borrow clothes from friends still to this day and bug for rides when needed. And I hadn't necessarily thought of that as a burden or shifted to just wanting to have everything that's new. And so you're making a good point about how that actually can just translate to the new generation. And I'll just give an example of my daughter wanting some new stuff. And what you mentioned with like the jeans, I kind of had like an old sweatshirt and turned those into leg warmers and arm warmers
Love
for my
that.
daughter. So yeah, like it's interesting to see how while someone like myself, and I think a lot of people in the room, right? The act of sharing seems like it's so innate, but hearing that it's not necessarily ubiquitous as time changes and from generation to generation is just a really interesting thought. And I love this idea of just going back to these older practices that we have been doing. I won't blame media or, propaganda from the kind of like the culture I think that everyone's bombarded with, but I think many of us could agree that consumerism is just pushed so much in the culture that sometimes it just becomes an unconscious habit. So I really appreciate you sharing all those resources. Yes, I would love to share those with everyone in this post recording. Um, you have so much information, we might have to have you back. I hope you wouldn't mind coming back
I
and
would love
sharing
to come
some
back.
more.
Yeah.
So
No, yeah,
yeah,
oh yeah, you go.
no, 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 please.
Oh no, just that I was going to say, right? Like, I think a lot of people, a lot of these things seem very obvious, right? Like, of course you do that. I think the point is like kind of making that connection in your mind of like you're already doing a lot of the things that actually combat overconsumption. But like using the framework of like, oh, this is what sustainability actually means in our everyday practice, right? Of like, how do we look out for one another? And that is truly like the most sustainable thing in terms of like building longevity in our solutions. So, yeah, just kind of like that is that is really what it is there's, that's kind of the guiding principle, I guess. So, yeah.
And I love that. And it definitely speaks to a lot of our congregations. And that just is an act of community engagement and community building. So yeah, I hope you don't mind. Will definitely have some questions and some time for Q&A at the end. But if I could shift gears,
Yeah.
and I do want to introduce our next speaker. I'm going to give Rebecca a moment to pull up the slides, if you don't mind. I want to introduce um, I consider a dear friend and a very strong supporter of our work. I want to make sure we spotlight her because there's a bunch of people in the room. I might have lost you, Sharon, if you don't mind just speaking up right before you get into the presentation. I want to let everyone know that Sharon Kemmer's, she's always had a green heart, starting with her studies in environmental education back in 1978. And while she might have not gotten a chance to practice professionally, she made a very impressive career as a federal employee for 40 years. And so upon retirement, she finds herself returning to her passion, an avid gardener, really awesome at growing and preserving produce. And she's just an amazing volunteer at Rockville United Church. We also have one of her very close companions here with us tonight, and I'll give Susan a chance to speak or share some of the resources in the chat with us. She is actually the chair of the newly minted Earth Care Committee, which started back in 2021 to present. And she's going to share how her congregation over at Rockville United Church has been encouraging their members to live a sustainable lifestyle, all year long. So perfect to talk about this subject now as we're heading into the holidays. I want to again welcome Sharon. So please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And thank you, Liv, for your presentation. It gets me all full of passion for things that we can continue to do. I want to share with you that Rockville United Church is actually a dual denominational church. It's comprised of United Church of Christ and the Presbytery USA. And I've been very lucky to inherit a congregation that is very earth-minded. There was a previous activity to my involvement, an earlier Green Earth team that's actually started in 2012 and ran through about 2017. I don't know if you're going to give my slides up. I just realized my cover slide isn't up. Rebecca. There we go. Doesn't say much, but during this initial period, an Earth Care vision was created, and a mission statement for Earth Care was developed. A designated fund where people could make donations, personal donations for greening. Our environment was created and sustained, and several congregation-wide supported green initiatives were done and started. A broad-based congregational exercise was done to visualize the future of our congregation, and this was done around the pandemic era or time frame. The resulting priorities visualize that care of our earth was one of our four pillar priorities, and for our church, subsequently creating an elder seat at the table of our council in 2021, and I became the chair of the supporting committee for the elder. At this time, the council also redistributed the workload in the church's committees, giving Earth Care the responsibility of managing our outdoor property, just under 3 acres. My apologies in advance, and gracious thank you to Sarah. My computer crashed earlier this week, and so I depended on Sarah to send me my draft slides. So there will be some redundancies and errors that I was not able to correct in the final because I didn't have a computer to do so. Next slide. Our congregation pledged to move from paper and plastic products to using our dishware and silver for church events. This was done during the 2012 and the earlier Earth Care Committee. And we also created a fenced-in organic garden area for congregational families to garden. The deer fencing and garden boxes, totaling 18 boxes, 12 4x16s and 5 or 6 8 4x8s were possible from congregational donations as well as through several grants, from the National Presbytery, Power and Change, National Presbytery, and to a lesser extent from Thriving Grant Action Grants. For those Lutherans who might be on this group list here, Thriving Grants have really been helpful for our Earth Care. From 2013 to present, a Share the Harvest project was started. And this was where our gardeners would stand with the produce, the extra produce from the garden after church, and on a free will donation basis, basically sell our produce to the congregational members. The result was from 2013 to the present, we've basically have sold about $7,600 through those garden donations and gifting them to the Manu Food Rescue Program. Earlier years, we gifted it to the REAP program under Montgomery County's REACH. REAP is Rockville Emergency Assistance Program, but Manu Food Rescue has been a benefactor for the most of the last 10 years. We've also done building upgrades, changing our lighting to LED, installed programmable and Wi-Fi thermostats so that if there's something amok or awry with the temperatures in the rooms, the office support can change it from their home in order to make it more efficient. We replaced our roofing with recycled composite slate shingles, replaced windows with insulating double glass, and again, leveraging matching grant funds from the National Capital Presbytery for these two projects and for several other projects. We've also done property upgrades, planted native gardens to reduce mowed areas. And we depended on a lot of the seeds and plants came from a local neighbor who was a friend, and she was downsizing and moving off from her property. So she donated the native plants for us to put on our property. And they abound. Next slide, please. I have found that working with the matching grant opportunities from both denominations, collaborating with the other committees within our congregation, joining forces with Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake, actively seeking green opportunities within Montgomery County and saying yes to when an Earth Care initiative is suggested seemed to bear the most fruit and progress in our efforts, some of which I'll mention. We've shifted lawn care service away from pesticide lawn management and began to hire landscape companies that did manual weeding instead of using herbicide methods. Our largest garden area is a cremains garden, and many of those buried there were advocates for the earth and preserving its resources. So it felt more respectful to honor the wishes of those who precede us. It also is a good testimony of the congregational support, because often it costs more to get manual weeding than to get, and are harder contracts to find, but to get manual weeding instead of herbicide treatments. And so it is with the congregational support in our budget every year that they allow this particular weeding to continue. We also created a monarch butterfly garden through collaboration with our local Rockville Rotary Club and its club environment that awarded us a $1,000 grant for the project, for the plants, the soil amendments. We're about in our third year, and while the monarch larvae have yet to enjoy our milkweed, the garden bed is actually maturing and progressively filling with milkweed and other pollinator flat plants. When we learned that Montgomery County was going to sponsor a compost pilot project, giving composters to individual homes and to commercial businesses, we asked if we could participate. We received the 2 passive compost tellers and provided data during the project, which ran about 1.5 years. Montgomery County has since declared the pilot successful and has created community commercial composting programs across or set up systems across Montgomery County. And Rockville United Church continues to compost using the Montgomery County towers we received. Simply by saying yes to a call for participants, we have one of the UCC's air quality monitoring systems installed on the outside of our church. This project was led by our social justice team, as the data collected will be part of a proof by data study regarding air being of less quality in marginalized communities. A side benefit is our congregation's Wi-Fi access to this data on a daily basis, 24-hour basis, that's being recorded. And when we had the Canadian fire winds, Canadian smoke winds come down this far south, one of our social justice representatives put a word out congregation-wide about the air quality for the day in the Montgomery County area, and to be cautious. Benefiting from a matching UCC Trinity grant of about $2,500, we were able to rebuild our memorial garden benches with engraved social justice quotes. Social justice was the reason for the grant, because one of the categories was social justice application. We got these, we had about 19-20 quotes that were provided by individuals, and then those that were picked, the top 3, were gathered as the most popular, selected through a survey of our congregation. One of the 3 quotes selected was Rachel Carson's, which is a wonderful testimony to the congregation's priority of caring for the earth. And I quote, "Those who contemplate the beauty of the earth find reserves of strength that will endure." I selected the bench that faces our memorial garden to have that quote on it, so that they can look at the flowers and the trees and the bushes that are flowering in the memorial garden as they sit on that bench. Last Christmas, we had a tabletop eco Christmas tree and eco resolution opportunity was held for the congregation. The tree was decorated with alternatives to plastic, such as bamboo toilet paper and paper towels, and eco messages and Christmas ornaments stating 2024 resolutions were hung by the congregational members who participated. The list of the resolutions was then posted on our church website under Earth Care. We also planted 4 native trees provided by and in collaboration with IPC. Our contractual commitment was to ensure that each received plenty of water. The Earth Care Committee funds were used to purchase 500 feet of hosing, and congregation members were asked to water through a sign-up genius. And I believe we met our commitments contractually, Sarah. And Anna, I think she's on here too. Next slide, please. And yes, there is more. Through our church and society, we made reusable, gently used donations. And Church and Society Committee worked with three nonprofits. We provided these donations to the asylum seekers and refugees through the SAMU First Response for the Rockville Respite Center, the New Neighbor Interfaith Alliance, and which collected furniture for new homes for settlement for refugees, and Goods for Good, which collected food. Well, they do food as well, but we participated in the collection of clothing and toys. So we provided underwear, winter wear and clothing, toys and furnitures and supplies, those that are gently used and in some cases new, but mostly it was a gently used program. We also hosted Wednesdays at 7 as virtual seminars. The first one we held was about the 6 R's. I saw somebody else refer to the 3 R's. We tried to cover the 6. And we played a 14-minute YouTube video of, I wore my plastic for 7 days and it changed my life. After viewing that video, it did change my life. And 3 of us took on the 7-day challenge, collecting our plastics that we used and created a bulletin board display of our plastic use, calling it the Plastic Use Shame Wall. After the wall had hung and people got exposed to it, and I mentioned it to the church from the pulpit, what was happening or why the plastic was cluttering up our narthex, we subsequently moved the whole presentation down to the Sunday school rooms where they could see it a little longer and absorb it a little more. And then we work with Faith Formation and our teen age youth group. They reused the plastic that was in our outfits to create a scarecrow for the church garden that they named Farmer Satan. So we continued the visibility of all the plastic use, and hopefully it left its mark on the youth that reused it for constructing the Farmer Satan statue for our yard. We also had Montgomery County leadership speak to our congregation, inviting the leader or the manager of the county recycling program, as well as on a separate occasion, the county composting manager. Independent of Earth Care Committee, but inviting its participation and facilitating leadership, our Church Life Committee had decided to hold several small groups on environmental topics. These small groups met for 5 to 7 weeks, and the first was held during the Advent season in 2023, Nature is Speaking, Crisis and Hope. The next one was this past spring, All We Can Save, Truth, Courage, and Solutions for the Climate Crisis. And the third one, which we just completed, Our Fellow Creatures, Earthly Extravagance. Participation varied between 20 and 35 people of the congregation participating in one or several. We had several slots that were available by day or by evening. Each of the teams, the Church Life Committee ensured that each of the teams had 2 facilitators, and study questions were prepared for the discussion. Having participated at some level in all 3 of those, it was really very insightful for my own behaviors and what's happening to our environment. And the discussions were also really valuable in my life. Church Life also led an earth-themed reusable yard sale by congregants, where the proceeds went to Interfaith Power and Light. The parking lot spaces were sold at $20 per space, and it was suggested that a tithing was made by each participant for any sales made. So it was reusing our stuff in our house, what a yard sale usually is, but it was in collaboration with the committee because of the theme was a reusable yard sale. Still coming for this year or for next year, the Earth Care Committee worked through council and our pastoral pastor for support for converting one of our parking lot drainage areas into a native gardens through the National Wildlife Federation Sacred Grounds Grant Program. We hope to formally apply this winter when more grant money is made available, working with our congregation, again, IPC, our best buds, and the Rockville Rotary Club to make it a success. And the last is a few of the Earth Care volunteers have crafted reusable beeswax sandwich wraps to introduce to our K-12 youth people in an upcoming Sunday education on plastics with our Faith Formation Committee. Next slide. Started back with the original greening team, Rockville United Church has remained certified as an eco-congregation by both our United Church of Christ and Presbyterian denominations for more than 10 years. I am proud of the environmental consciousness and actions that Rockville United Church has taken as a congregation, and through many who have led with their passion and heart for preserving our God-given earth that's entrusted in us in our 3 little acres. Thank you.
Sharon, it is hard to believe that you and your team and the members have accomplished so much. Your 3 acres is very beautiful. I've had the privilege of being there
Thank you.
more than once, and it is such a welcoming and just a beautiful space. I do see a couple hands raised. So before we jump into Q&A, again, I want to thank you, Sharon and Liv. We do see some questions, and I want to go back to the video, Sharon. You were so kind to share that to me. I think it was over the summer when you mentioned, and I did
Yeah.
get to watch it, but my memory's failing me right now, and I want to just make sure it was, I believe it's ASAP Science. It's We Wore Our Plastic Waste in Public for 7 days, correct? It's like a 13-minute film, because I believe
Yeah.
I have the link, and I'm just going to put this in. That was one of the chats questions, because that is a great film to share. It's especially for green teams here. If you're having a green team meeting, that's such a short and engaging film that you can share and invite other members to watch with you. It's very impactful. You know how we feel about plastic. That's kind of like the bane of my own personal existence. I'm very passionate about reducing plastic. So Sharon, I know you're doing a lot with that. Yeah, please jump.
And I'm happy to share my slide deck. The discussion afterwards was covering the 6 R's and how we can do, what are the alternatives we can do. And I created a table on each of the R's, which listed those things that the congregation identified, or the members that were there that night identified as alternatives. You know, like getting rid of the plastic deodorant containers, using pods instead of, using, there's there's just so many things, but it's rethinking, it's recycling, it's reusing, and happy to pass that set of slides to you, Sarah,
Yes, please.
if you want to use it or share it or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to put that in our post-recording follow-up email. Again, as Liv mentioned earlier too, there's some resources for the state. I already see that some people are saying they would love to see that. So we're going to open up the floor here, but I do want to make mention, I saw a hand earlier, and I want to make sure I don't miss them. I believe, Mark, you had your hand up earlier?
Yes, there were 3 things I want to mention. I was raised 70 years ago in the All Souls Church, which is Unitarian Universalist. Well, several things I want to say. In terms of herbicides, the anti-herbicide people say I'm pro-herbicide, and the pro-herbicide people say I'm anti-pesticide. Actually, National Wildlife Federation says there's only one valid use of herbicide, and that is like an English hiving vine is too hard to dig out and too destructive to pull out. So what you do is you cut stump it. You saw it at the ground level and apply a little bit of glyphosate into that cut stump. So that's the one and only approved way. I'm trying to be practical here.
I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. I know there's a lot of questions about that. Yeah, Sharon, please, because you're
I actually had read an article about killing the vines and the plants in my backyard, and it talked about cutting and then immediately spraying them with the stump that you left behind, spraying them with spray paint. So I was surprised to see it work this year, and that which I made bald in my backyard, and it was, all the trees did not come back as they often do. So I just offer that. That's a little bit less, well, it's still chemical, but it's possibly a little less invasive and a little bit less harder on the body, because you don't have to dig the root out.
That's a good point. I had not heard about the spray paint, so that's interesting. Unfortunately, I actually have a couple of folks that have vines, and they are really, really troublesome. If you don't get to them, I was unaware that they could destroy the foundation of your home. That's so insidious once it gets in and wraps up. So just to let everyone know about a preview actually of our 2025 lineup, I'll give everyone a flyer of our webinars that are coming out for next year. We're going to be kind of taking a deeper dive into invasive species. So we'll do kind of like an intro into it, and then how to identify, and then how to remove them. So that's a really kind of like a hot topic for a lot of folks. So thanks
I
for
would be glad to join you on that. That's what I do.
Oh, I appreciate that, and I'll be reaching out to you post the webinar. Thanks so much, Mark.
Sure.
Did you have anything else before I see a couple other hands, and I just want to make sure I'm getting to everyone in the room. Mark, was there anything else that you wanted to add to that?
Well, of course, like when I bought my home 40 years ago, I just mechanically remove all the invasive, except a few things, cut stump. And then the natives popped back up. So I only had to plant about 12 species. It's 48 species of native plants. My favorite is the Native American persimmon. I get free fruit every year as it falls down. It tastes better than the Japanese.
I've heard that too. Thanks so much for sharing, Mark. I appreciate that. I want to make sure I'm being respectful. I can't see everyone, but the next hand I see is Paul. You want to go ahead and unmute?
Yeah, just a comment about what Mark was saying about selective herbicide use, and you must keep the weather in mind because herbicides uh, will bleed out from their application spot to surrounding ground, and so you want to do it during a dry period. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, this is all really great information as we're thinking about a lot of people are doing a lot of fall prep, right? So there's two main times during the year that you're doing that. And so if we can not purchase and use pesticides, the less that we're using, the better. And planting natives is always a great way to kind of combat that. Um,
Yeah, and don't forget to leave the leaves. You all know about that, right?
oh, Yes, and unfortunately, I will just make mention for folks who might have an HOA as myself. I'd mentioned this previously to a couple other folks that I'm kind of like the problem child in my neighborhood because I'm always kind of combating that, and I just try to make neater piles. But that's definitely something I've bumped up against with my HOA. I know HOAs have specific standards, and it's my hope that they might change
Are
their.
you in Maryland?
I am in Maryland, yes.
Guess what? We got a law passed 3 years ago. It took effect last October 4th. HOAs cannot force you to remove native plants. That's the law. They cannot make you do that. Did you know that?
So I am somewhat aware of that, but with the leaves, just specifically, they want me to get rid of them and not leave them
But
in
the
my
law
yard.
says they
So
can't make you do it. You can leave a native native ecosystems.
you can. Well, I do have to take a deeper dive into that and then provide some information because they are definitely on me and I don't want to get fined.
Yeah,
So thanks for bringing
it's
that up.
past
That
the
was
state
great.
legislature. It's the law.
I love that. You know, it's interesting. I think sometimes information that doesn't get shared, you don't know about it until people bring it
No.
up. So I
No.
appreciate that. Yeah, does anyone else? I want to make sure I'm not missing anyone. Feel free to unmute if you have a question about, just moving away from consumption as we're about to head into this busy holiday season. I know for myself, I'm looking at alternatives as opposed to gift wrapping. Not really a big fan of that. I have little kids, so I've been doing for this past year to 2 years, I've really just been using newspaper or something that's compostable because the gift wrapping paper I think is that's just it really grinds my gears all the waste with the paper even though they love shredding it. So yeah.
So Sarah, one of the things that I do for gift wrapping, I actually get reusable grocery bags and I put everything in that, and then they've got a reusable grocery bag to use instead of plastic.
I love that idea.
So, and you can find some real fun, creative ones out there. And actually, you guys have a nice reusable grocery bag now.
I wish I had it on hand because I would show it. I hope that everyone gets a chance. If you come out to one of our events, we will be having some events and they are very nice. Thank you for mentioning that. And I will take you up on that because that's so great. And actually, like you said, you can reuse it and then you have a bag. So that is a perfect way to kind of move away from gift wrapping paper.
So the 3 R's are reduce, reuse, and recycle. That's been around for 70 years. What are the other R's?
Rethink.
I love that one.
Yeah.
Repair.
Repair. That's right.
That's good.
And
Recycle, rethink, repair.
I think it's refuse.
oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Confused.
Definitely. I mean, I think that at least I can say for Prince George's County, I think it was a little difficult start when they got rid of the bags. I think there was a little bit of pushback about why don't we have plastic bags, just, talking about less consumption and refusing and reducing that. But I mean, within the first month, it was not a hard shift. So in my mind, I always correlate that to we're just doing things just because they've been habits that we made, and it's so easy to make the switch. And then once you make the switch, it's like, yeah, why was I doing that? And it's nice to see the streets cleaner. I can definitely say, just as a Prince George's County resident, I've seen a huge decrease in just the clutter. I mean, you could see bags just kind of like, unfortunately, decorating the trees. I mean, it was just driving me crazy. And then in January, this whole past year, I've just seen such a reduction, and it's beautiful to see. So I'm hoping that becomes like a statewide thing. We'll see. I think more counties that jump on, I'm hopeful that it would become a statewide um, law. I want to make sure it's very hard to believe that we're almost coming up on the hour here. Does anyone else have any other questions? I do see, just to make mention, if anyone hasn't looked at the chat, there was a great option to also use scarves or shawls, like a dual gift. So you can wrap it in a scarf or a shawl, and then you can use that. And it says even thrift stores recycle portions of stained clothes. Liv, you made mention of that earlier with the jeans. So that's a great thing. I love upcycling. I think that's like this new term, like upcycling and just re-thrifting. And I'm definitely a big thrifter myself.
So I have a question, Sarah, for Liv,
Yeah.
actually. So I like this idea of kind of sustainability and, the community all working together. But there's also like self-sufficiency can also sort of, I think, can have a very different connotation. Like you don't need to have all, everything under the sun yourself. I mean, my goodness, like sharing sleds is brilliant. But the idea of self-sufficiency in very rural areas, I think, is kind of a different approach than in a urban or suburban area. Because if you aren't self-sufficient, you are out to lunch sometimes.
Absolutely.
You're not raising your own food or whatever.
Absolutely. And I think it's more so of like self-sufficiency, like in an overconsumption context, the way
Yeah.
that we view or self-sufficiency is not an honest definition, I think. Like self-sufficiency in practice and reality looks very different for like, yeah, especially rural areas. Like my grandma lives out on a farm in Kentucky and is like on her own. And yeah, has a million ways of looking out for herself. But yeah, when you talk about it in the context of like, overconsumption and like when we're taught that we can kind of replace community relationships with, things that we buy or services that we purchase, things that, yeah, just like outsource our relationships to a much more like monetary transaction. I think that's when that version of self-sufficiency becomes a means for creating overconsumption rather than a lifestyle that like self-sufficiency in rural context is far more sustainable because it is rooted in like what is immediately around me, what are the things that I need to be able to like look out for myself, that is not strict of community at the same time, so.
Great. I just wanted to raise a couple of comments. I think Colleen was talking about how at her congregation they had a alternative gift wrapping demonstration table, which I think is an excellent idea. Just so that, just kind of demonstrating what people can actually do, and you can really get so creative. And then earlier, Chirag was talking about coffee hour. And that's one of my, so I know at my church, it took us 5 years to switch from, compostable cups to just reusable cups. And the way it worked out is we just had people just bring their mugs from home. So we have kind of like a hodgepodge of different types of mugs. And then we figured out that with a sign up genius, everybody on the hospitality committee and the welcome committee could all just kind of come together and be the assigned people to do, to run the dishwasher after each service. And it's worked really well for us, even though getting there, I would say don't be discouraged. It typically takes quite a while to get to that point. But once you're there, people just realize, oh, it's not so hard to just, press the buttons on the dishwasher and it it washes and dries everything. So yeah, great ideas. And that's, I guess that's an example of refusing. So thanks, Jeff, for pointing that out.
And thank you, Anna, so much for jumping in. I actually really appreciate that comment because we have heard from many of our partner congregations that same exact sentiment, right? It took a while to get there. I don't want to put Episcopal Church of the Ascension on the spotlight, but that was a big switch, right? And then, like Anna mentioned, once everyone does it, it's like, why haven't we been doing this? And it actually, if you are a congregation that has a privilege of like having those big dishwashers, it takes so much less water and then to actually do them by hand. And then also just to be respectful of everyone's time, but I want to make mention of one other thing that Anna brought to my attention. I had never heard of this before in Montgomery County. It's a time bank, and just an amazing concept if other people are familiar with it, where you can trade services, right? Please correct me on that, Anna, if I'm getting that incorrect in any way, right? So like sewing can be whatever your expertise is, you can trade that in for time. It was just it's a wild concept. And when we were talking about it, I'm like, why aren't more people doing that? That's really cool.
Yeah, that's true. So there's actually time banks. There's one in Silver Spring. There's one in, I believe, College Park. And anyone who lives, works, or plays in any of those places can join a time bank, and you just exchange time for skills. So I can share the Silver Spring Time Bank link in here, and we can look for the College Park one. It's another way of really moving towards sustainable consumption.
Co-ops do that too.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. There's such a wealth of information and just knowledge in this room, and I just want to be conscious of that and thank everyone for sharing all their information. I don't want to hold anyone past our time. If it's all right, Rebecca, would you mind just sharing the slide deck one last time? We always close our program with a prayer as well. And I love this one, especially again, it seemed like we had a second summer, and now all of a sudden winter is here. So I'd like to close us out with this, a very short, sweet prayer. God of all seasons, the winter months are hard for those who cannot escape the cold. I cannot clothe the world, but I can offer this prayer to those who are without four walls to protect them from the season. And may this prayer find those who struggle to fight the cold, that they may feel the warmth of your love. Wrapped in his arms around those who struggle. Let me do my best to follow that example. And I know that everyone in this room will do that as well. Amen. And oh, thank you so much, Anna. You already beat me to it. I just wanted to make sure everyone got a link to our evaluation form. Please let us know what you thought about tonight's topic. I cannot give enough thanks to Liv and Sharon. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and spending your time. And thank you to everyone who spent their time with me on a Thursday evening. We're very grateful to have you here. So yeah, thank you all. Feel free to enjoy the rest of your evening, have dinner, spend time with your family, think about what we talked about tonight, and wishes for a happy and healthy new year for everyone. We'll see you in 2025. I can't believe I'm saying that. Thank you so much. Thank you. Good night, everyone.